Hi everyone, Elsie Jensen here. Tonight we are going to make like a Mongolian beef with a shishito pepper and shiitake mushroom stir fry, not stir fry, lo mein. Gotta remember this. And then we're gonna bake up this loaf. And now this is my Frankenstein loaf because when I was making it yesterday, I realized I ran out of flour halfway through. So then I was like, oh, I'll make whole wheat loaf. And so this has three different flours in it. It's Frankenstein. This has some all-purpose flour, or like all-purpose flour in it. It has some cake flour, which is not one that you necessarily want to use with it, but I needed a little bit more to make it all the way. And it has whole wheat flour in it. So it's my Frankenstein loaf, but I think it's going to have a great pop because it is already kind of bougie and bubbly. But it's got a little bit of honey in it because it's a honey wheat sourdough. So I think it's going to be delicious, but it is definitely created out of necessity of what I had to kind of throw in it because I had already started it and I didn't realize I didn't have like a backup bag of flour, which I always do. And I now have 30 plus pounds of flour in my pantry. I did not have that yesterday, but I got my restock on. I'm going to give this score one big one. And we're going to pop this in my nice and hot Dutch oven here. So I had it preheating at 500. So I'm hoping, I feel like it's definitely going to turn out, but you never know. We'll see if our Frankenstein loaf makes it here. Sometimes you just got to get creative with what you're doing. I'm not one to throw things or waste things. Sometimes if I know something's not going to turn out right, I'll turn it into a focaccia or something else. But I think this is going to be good. So we're going to go in our oven at 500 degrees, and I'm going to put my timer for 20 minutes. So we're going to bake it just like we do our regular loaf. And then after 20 minutes, we'll take the lid off and we will get everything going and cook it for 20 minutes at 450. So we've got that going. I'm going to turn my water up high here because we're going to boil our water for our lo mein noodles. And let's prep up first. Let's get our meat prepped up. And we'll be coating this with some cornstarch and some seasonings and spices. But we're going to mainly make kind of a sticky sauce that will hold everything together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first cut and this is kind of top sirloin or, a sirloin thing. So it's actually a pretty tender cut of meat and not a lot of fat in it, which kind of makes it really nice for this. And then we are going to make some just nice little simple smaller cuts for our kind of Mongolian beef here. There we go. You don't want to cut it too thin because, again, you want a little bit of, base on it, but you don't want it too thick. So it's just finding that happy kind of median in there. Let's get it all sliced up for this. And this is about, again, 2 pounds of meat, which I find is really great. Good amount for when you're making, like a stir fry or whatnot for it. So we're going to again, we'll slice this up. Now, this is a top sirloin. You can also use petite sirloin or even like a flank steak. Okay, slice down number one. And I'm using my cleaver to cut this. I actually find if you've never worked with a cleaver, it's really great for cutting through meat. You wouldn't think that just having a knife with a little bit bigger blade and heft would make a lot of difference, but it gives you a much more accurate cut and it's a lot more simple, especially when I'm making my chili. So I have my famous chili that I make every year, and it's won a couple of awards. And I have to cut up a lot of meat for that chili. And that's where my cleaver really does come in handy. Here we go. And we're down to our last little bit. And we're just going to get this prepped up. And then let me cut off a little bit of this fat. I'm not going to coat it yet with the cornstarch. I'm going to wait to do that until right before we're about to fry it. That way it kind of stays nice and crispy on it and doesn't turn too much into a paste. we go. So we got our 2 pounds of our steak here, chopped up. Give my hands a quick rinse. And then I'm actually going to grab a bowl real quick. I'm not going to do it, but when we kind of toss it in there, I realized I need a little bit of a bowl to toss it. We'll do the big one for when it's time. But while we're waiting, I'm going to just slide this back here. We'll slide, put our veggie cutting board. Our water for our lo mein is up to a nice boil. So we're going to use, I'm going to put in 2 packs of lo mein. This is the wide noodle. You could also, you don't have to buy this, but if you have ramen, you can use ramen noodle to make this. Actually, kids really like it with ramen. But we're going to put this in here. This noodle cooks up really, really fast. So you just don't want to overcook it, or your end product will be mushy lo mein, and that's not going to be happy. So it takes just about 4 minutes for it to get nice and tender for this, and then we'll take it out. So I'm going to just use my this is a pasta spoon to make sure that none of them really stick together. So it is really crucial that once you drop it into your water, you stir it up enough. Otherwise, what will happen is you'll get those that are sitting close to each other clumped together, and you don't want a noodle log in here. There we go. And then I'm going to check my time so I know when to grab this out. Okay. So we've got that. Let's get some of our veggies starting to be prepped up for our stir fry. So in our stir fry, again, we are going to use, and I should say stir fry. It's like stir fry veggies on lo mein. So we'll clarify it. So it's not a true stir fry, but it's kind of got those veggies of a stir fry, and I'll make this lovely marinade, and then we'll pop in our lo mein noodles. So it'll be just delicious. But we're going to use shishito peppers and shiitake mushrooms, carrots, and then onions. And we'll also have green onions, but most of those are going to go in with our Mongolian beef. For my onions here, because I have lo mein, which are kind of long, skinny noodles, I'm going to do like thinner slices of my onions so that they kind of blend with the noodle. Get this last one. And then we're going to give, I've got a great boil going, so I want to make sure I give those a quick toss. Because again, I do not want them to stick together. And then, perfect. So again, just constantly toss them. If you don't have a pasta thing, just use tongs to kind of pull them up. Or if you don't have tongs, get a big fork. But tongs are one of those kitchen utensils that I highly recommend you have. And if you haven't made the switch to using them, they're actually really great. I absolutely love using tongs. They're probably that and my knife are my most used things. Okay. We've got my carrots here. I'm going to give these a quick peel to get that whole woody, dry outer layer off of it. And then we're going to actually use my peeler to give little ribbons, to have carrot ribbons as one of ours. And carrot ribbons I prefer as my cut for in our our lo mein, is because they're thin, they soak up the flavor, they get nice and tender, and they just kind of match with the noodles. But you want to just make sure you first peel off that outer layer, because that outer layer will be dry, won't have a great texture or flavor to it. Okay, and we're just going to peel it off just like this. And these are they'll soak up the flavor of our marinade that we're cooking in. They'll get nice and flexible to move with the lo mein noodles. So it's just a really great way. So we're just going to peel these off. Now, in a pinch, you could also use like the matchstick noodles, or not matchstick noodles, but the matchstick carrots that you can buy from the store. My only problem with those is those are always dry. Like when you buy them from the bag, their bag is always dried out, and they're thicker. So you end up with more of a crunchy carrot in your lo mein. There we go. So we'll have this good amount here. And I will say, doing this, I also love to do carrot ribbons for like my coleslaw too. It's just a great way to kind of use them. Okay. We'll get these last little bits here. Perfect. So just getting all of that. And then it's been about 4 minutes. So I'm going to test my noodle and then we'll take it out. Got a lot of this kind of starch right here. And then I'm just going to give them a feel. Perfect. You don't want to have them overcooked. I always like them right where they feel still a little firm, but very flexible. Because again, we are going to be making this lovely marinade that they're going to soak in. So let's strain these. And then we'll toss just a little bit of sesame oil on them. Give them a good shaker. Okay. So I'm just going to leave my strainer over there so all of that extra residual liquid can kind of fall down on there. Just put them on here for right now. But we want to toss them with a little bit of sesame oil. You don't need a lot, like a teaspoon or so. That's going to help them prevent from sticking them together. They'll still kind of stick a little bit, but it just gives it a little bit. And it's going to give it a nice kind of that sesame flavor. But again, don't use too much because sesame oil has a really strong flavor. So just give them a little bit of a toss here. Perfect. And now we can leave that to sit and get that going. Let me get my pan over here for our noodles. Looks like it was a little wet underneath there. And then I'm going to turn this on and we can start cooking up our onions. So we're going to add in about, this is a big pan, and I'm going to start with about 2 tablespoons of olive oil for this. And we're going to saute up our onions, and this is going to be making the lo mein for our dinner tonight. So I'm going to sprinkle them all in here. We're going to give them a quick saute. And as you can see, it's already nice and hot because the burner was already warm. And the trick is to make sure you get these onions to just about at caramelization to really bring out those nice sweet flavors, which will really enhance the marinade that we're going to put in here. I'm going to give this a nice kind of coat. And then I'm going to turn it down to about a 4. So it will saute over just like around a medium heat. Those onions are about to get me here. Oh, might be tearing up really, really much. Okay. Whew. Let's start. I'm going to coat our beef right now in our cornstarch and a little bit of garlic salt. So I've got all my beef in here. And let me grab my garlic salt. Silly me. Okay. We're going to put just a little bit of garlic salt. I've got a good amount of meat here. You don't need a whole bunch to get it salted all the way through, but I want to say I put about a teaspoon in here of garlic salt. But you do want to flavor it a little bit before we kind of coat it up. And then we're going to put in about a 1/2 cup of cornstarch. And we want it to really coat up all the all of our steak so that it's nice and powdery. This is what's going to give it that kind of crunchy kind of edge to it. And it will also help be the thickener for the sauce. So I'm going to just completely coat it in here, and I'm going to add enough cornstarch to where they're all got this kind of white dusting to it. I don't want to leave any of my meat uncoated. And really the best way to do this is just to get in there with your hands. You can do it with tongs if you wanted to, but this is a little bit easier. There we go. Perfect. So again, I'm making sure I get all of my meat kind of coated up so that it has this nice little white kind of powdery on it, and that's going to give it, again, this crispy edge on there. Okay, beautiful. Let me wash my hands. Let's give our onions a stir here, and then I'm going to start heating up some oil to start sauteing up my my steak here. There we go. I'm going to turn my burner on. We'll get our oil hot, and then once I start frying it, we're going to drop it down to about a medium.
You have a question? Do you ever make soups?
Soup or did soups? Yes, I actually make soups a lot. I typically make soups during my lunchtime stream because I just think a soup and a grilled cheese is like heaven on earth. But yes, I have lots of soups. Actually, in this past week, a couple of the soups I made this lovely beef and veggie soup, like a beef and veggie stew, creamy roasted cauliflower soup. I did a butternut squash soup and then like a roasted veggie soup. So I've done a lot of great soups recently. I love soups. And then chicken noodle, it's like my classic soup. Okay, once my oil is hot, we'll throw in and we'll start frying up our things. But let me start prepping our other vegetables to kind of go in here.
You have a question? What brand of pans do you use?
So I have two primary pans that I use. For my non-stick cooking, I use the Hexclad, which I absolutely love. I've had my Hexclad pans for about 2 years now, and I will say I have yet to scratch them or damage them, and they're really easy to clean. So those are like the winners for me when it comes to that. And I've gone through a lot of different non-stick pans. So far, this is the best that I have found. And then for my metal-based pans, I love All-Clad. And I've had my All-Clad pan since I got married, and that's like almost 17 years ago. So this pan has been holding up great. So it's one of those things where it was expensive at the time, but they work just as good as the day I bought them, and they look fantastic. So I really do love them a lot. In fact, I like them so much I put them in my Amazon storefront because they're ones that I truly recommend. Okay, let's get our shishito peppers kind of up here and give a quick little slice on them. Now, these are ones that you can honestly just blister them and leave them, whole. You don't have to do that much. I'm just going to do a simple cut down the middle of them. I'm not going to worry about de-seeding them or anything like that because that's just a lot of extra work, and those seeds on here aren't so much. You don't even have to necessarily trim them up.
A question, do you have a cookbook?
I do not have a cookbook, but I do post recipe cards for my members, and then we always post all of the videos from our cooking every day, so people can always recreate my recipes from there. But that is one of my goals, is to kind of get a cookbook or work on it, because I've gotten lots of requests for it. So it's hopefully in the future when I find some time, but it's kind of busy right now with 5 kids and everything. Keeps me on my toes, but future goals. Okay, let's get these. Now, if you've never had a shishito pepper, they're actually kind of fun. And it's essentially 1 in 10 peppers have a little bit of heat, so a little bit of spicy. So they're primarily a mild pepper, but 1 in 10 will be spicy. And it's always funny because when you get one, you know right away that it's spicy. It's kind of like playing, Russian roulette with it. And I don't know how they determine that 1 in 10 is spicy, but that's what it says on the bag. And it's true. You can eat one and you'd be like, oh, these aren't spicy. These aren't spicy. Then boom, it's spicy. Okay, let's get those prepped up. And again, I'm just having them. Some of the smaller ones I kept whole. I'm going to throw my carrots in right now and let them saute up. And then once my oil is nice and hot and sizzling, I will start cooking my meat off in batches.
Good question. Can you go over what the peppers are?
They are shishito peppers. So honestly, I get them at my local grocery store, and they're actually like next to like the cucumber bags. Like when you buy the baby cucumbers, right next to it is the shishito peppers. So where they have those little sweet baby peppers that you can buy, the sweet peppers, they're right there. but they're delicious because they go really great with Asian cuisines. Okay, we're gonna let that kind of saute up for a second. Let me test my water here. So I'm gonna test if a little drop of water and it sizzles. Let's see, just about. Almost had it there. So 30 more seconds and then I'll pop the meat in. Let me grab a little plate to pull these out on because when they'll rest up. And I'm gonna grab some tongs.
You have a question? How do your 5 kids not bother you when you cook?
A lot of time it's because this is their like freedom time. This is, we got just back from a game. So my older one's like, tired from that. But my other ones, they kind of do either they play in one of our playrooms or they get their movies. This is their calm time. Just let them go. I have a kind of strict rules where I don't let them have electronics during the day. So after they've like completed their homework and getting their stuff from the day, this is kind of their reward time before, because then we eat dinner and then it's kind of like the bedtime routine after that. So they're enjoying it. Although you wouldn't know it because like your view is always this, but my kids are always going back and forth behind me. A lot of times they love to make funny faces at me, try to get me off guard. It's kind of funny. And then occasionally you guys will see Chef Teddy. Okay. So we've got them in there again. I'm not going to put too many in there at a time because you want them to crisp up. And if you just throw all of your meat in there, it's going to turn that oil temperature down. And then you'll get like a soggy instead of a crispy. So I'm going to turn my oil down to about a 5. Our sourdough is beeping at us, so it's ready for us to take the lid off and check on its little pop. And this is where I'm going to say, this is the true of whether my Frankenstein loaf is going to turn out or not. And it's crazy. When I run out, it's funny because I almost never run out of flour, but I had run out of every flour except a little bit of cake flour and whole wheat. It looks like this is going to be a pretty fantastic loaf. Look at that pop. This is my honey whole wheat loaf made with 3 different types of flours.
You have a question? What cut of meat are you using tonight?
So I'm using some top sirloin, which is actually like a really great one to use because it's a cheaper cut of beef and it's nice and tender, but also like, and not super fatty, which I love for like a stir fry. And I'm going to set my timer for 20 minutes here. Perfect. And then we'll have our bread out. I want it to bake up. I know like with the bread doesn't necessarily go well, like, bread and Asian food, but I'm out of my sourdough bread, so I really wanted to make sure I have enough to make some sandwiches tomorrow. Okay, let's flip these guys over. We should have this nice kind of crispy edge on here. And it doesn't take long for you to fry up this meat. You don't want to overcook it because you want your meat to still be tender. That's why we kind of have a little bit of it, not a super thin cut, but kind of like that in the middle. And the cornstarch on there is going to be doing 2 things. It's going to crisp up the meat, but it's also going to be our thickener for our sauce afterwards. Let's get this here. Let that cook. We've got our carrots going in here. I'm going to toss in a little bit of garlic, and then we'll be making a marinade to put on our for our noodle base here in just a second. But I want my garlic to get a little bit of a nice crispiness to it. So I'm going to put in I'm going to do about a teaspoon. We're going to be adding more into our marinade later. So I don't want to overdo it right now, but I want to make sure I get some in there to kind of crisp up. Adds just a lovely flavor. Okay. There we go. very, very fragrant. I just love the smell of garlic. Okay, let that saute for just a smidge longer. And then we'll take this out and we'll start working on that marinade here. But let's get this next batch out. Let's see how they're crisping up. Are they looking good? Maybe like 30 more seconds. Okay, let's start on making our little bit of our marinade for our lo mein. Okay, let me start off. I've got some miso paste, which I absolutely love. You can buy this in your grocery store. It's just in the like international aisle. It's a little bit of a tub. Once you open it, you have to refrigerate it, but I love it. Adds this nice kind of savory umami flavor. We're gonna do some coconut aminos. And everything I say, everything I buy, I try to buy just at my local grocery store. Nothing too, bougie. We're gonna do about, a tablespoon, 2 tablespoons of coconut aminos. We're gonna do about a teaspoon of sesame oil, not too much. Because again, sesame oil has a lot of flavor. I've got some oyster sauce. We're gonna add in about a tablespoon of oyster sauce. There we go. We're gonna add in about a tablespoon of soy sauce.
You have a question. What's coconut aminos?
It is made from coconut blossom nectar, and so it has this kind of sweet, savory flavor to it, which is really delicious, and it just pairs so well with Asian cuisines. It just helps build that umami flavor in there.
And where can they find the recipe for this?
So the one, I actually believe I made this as a recipe card for my members, so all of my members will have that. But for all of like our just regular followers and whatnot, I do post the video of our streams on our, on the link on our page, so you can always go to that and re-watch it, and then cook along with me again, because I make sure I go through my measurements and every like step as I'm cooking. So we got our first batch of our beef out here. And then I'm going to lay our next one. Again, make sure you kind of lay it all nice and flat. Try not to stack it on top of each other for this. And this is about a little over 2 pounds of that top sirloin. There we go. And I might even have to do 3 batches. Yeah, because I want this to cook up. Sometimes, you resist the urge to kind of like dump it all in there and kind of go at one time, because again, you don't want to like make a soggy kind of beef. You want it to be crispy so that it has that crunch but still tender in the middle. Let's throw in our shishito peppers. I was about to say shiitake peppers, but that's a mushroom. We're going to be adding that in just a second. So let's throw in our shiitake peppers.
You have a question? Do you have trouble getting the kids to eat new food?
You know what? Not really. They'll try all of my foods once. Now, whether they like it, that's a different thing. But I am pretty adventurous when I cook, and I try to make lots of different foods. I'm a person who unless it's like a classic or a favorite, I'm always like trying to recreate and do different things all the time. So my kids never kind of get stuck with their same meals over and over. So they're really good about trying it. Now, my kids go through stages. We're going to add in about a tablespoon of our Japanese barbecue sauce, which is like a sweet soy sauce, not a barbecue sauce at all. So I find that kind of the ages from 8 to 12, my kids are always the pickiest eaters. But before that and after that, they're great eaters. We're going to add in about a tablespoon of some mirin, which is some sweet wine. And then we're going to add in a little bit of vinegar. You can use rice vinegar, but I never have rice vinegar. So a little apple cider, just a little bit to give it a little kick here. And we're going to mix this up for it and our base for our sauce. And this is going to be making the marinade for our lo mein. And then we'll be making our base for our Mongolian beef in a little bit.
Can you go over what's in the marinade?
Yes. So in the marinade, it's actually pretty complex. Let me put a little bit of ginger in here. We're going to add in about, a teaspoon of ginger paste in here. But I've got soy sauce, coconut aminos, mirin, sesame oil, oyster sauce, Japanese barbecue sauce, and we're gonna add in a little bit of garlic here and a little bit of vinegar. So there's a lot of different flavor complexities to make a great marinade. And I think that's I think people are always a little bit scared when they're making Asian cuisines because there is a really complex flavor profile. But once you kind of realize that all of these kind of work really well together, and you don't have to necessarily be super precise on your like measurements to get this kind of really delicious flavor complex, which it's just so delicious, but it is a lot of different working pieces. And I said, once I kind of started like going in there and kind of figuring it out how flavors work off, my kids always say that my Asian food is better than our kind of our local Chinese restaurant. So I always take that as a compliment. Now I'm not necessarily going to use all of it, but I always like to make sure I have enough of it for putting in. And this is going to be for our lo mein and our stir fry veggies. It's going to have that just a lovely kind of teriyaki base to it. Just got a lot of complexity. Okay, I've got my shishito peppers in here, kind of sauteing up. And then we'll add in our mushrooms and things. Oh, we also use some miso paste in there. That was one of my ingredients that I forgot to mention. Okay, let's see how these are going. Perfect. Let's flip these guys over because this is going to be our crispy. And again, you just kind of cook it up till you see just a little bit of that browning coming through. As they sit and cool on the plate, they actually crisp up even more for this.
You have a question. What's a good substitute for the peppers if they can't find those?
So you could just use a straight up bell pepper or a sweet pepper for it. If you do want a little bit of heat, you could definitely put in like a little bit like a poblano or jalapeno if you wanted the heat. Shishitos I find are not very spicy at all, which is why I can tolerate because I can't handle any spice. Also, I find the vegetables that go in here, you can really do anything. Sometimes I do cabbage in here and I kind of play it up. So like I kind of work with it or what I have to kind of use it. Now I do love the peppers because I think it's just kind of delicious. Let's add in a little bit. We've got our shiitake mushrooms here. Now I'm gonna push all my ingredients right here, and I'm gonna add just a smidge more olive oil because mushrooms are kind of like sponges, and I want them to get a little hit on there to kind of saute up. Now, these are shiitake mushrooms, which play really well in Asian cuisines. They're a little bit more chewy than like a portobello or a button mushroom, but they soak up the flavors really well. So when we add our marinade in, they're just going to be so flavorful. Okay, this part, it looks like we're just about done, and we'll add our last batch in for it. But again, we've got this nice kind of crispy bit, so I'm going to transfer them over to my plate. And again, as they cool, they actually get a little bit more crunchy than when you take them first directly out of the oil. There we go. And again, try not to overcook your meat. That's why I like to do a slightly thicker cut. I don't like to do the super paper thin cuts because, you know, then you're going to have an overcooked meat that's chewy. And this is going to give you crunchy but tender. Let's get our last batch in here. And again, try not to, when you're frying them up, don't just dump this whole pot of like meat or bowl of meat in there because you won't get crispy beef then. What will happen is your oil will drop down in temperature, and so you'll get a soggy, chewy beef. And it's one of those things where it does really make a difference taking the time to saute it up in batches. Okay. We've got my last bit of pieces here.
Question, what seasoning is on the meat?
Right now, there is just a little bit of garlic salt and cornstarch. So that cornstarch is going to be, that's the white powder you see, and that's what's crisping it up, and then a little bit of garlic salt for it. But again, most of the flavoring on this is going to come in with our marinade that we're going to make here in just a second for that. Get our mushrooms kind of tossed in here. And now I'm going to add just a little bit of our marinade in here to kind of saute up our vegetables in it. Not all of it, because I want to put a lot of this in when we do our put our noodles in. But I like to have a base go down. Coat all of that up. It smells lovely. So good. Okay, flip that guy over. And we'll add our noodles in just a second. While we're kind of working over here, I've got like a half a cup here of water. We're going to add, I'm going to just start making my mix to it that we'll add in on the side. We're going to add in a half a cup of soy sauce. So I've got water and soy sauce because dilute it. You don't want to use too much or it's going to get really salty. So we'll have that together. For this, it's going to be, we're going to use ginger, garlic, brown sugar, a little bit of Japanese soy sauce, and a little bit of vinegar to get the flavors for our Mongolian beef. And then we'll throw in our green onions at the very end. Here we go. And we're actually going to use the, how we're frying it, and we've got our meat drippings in here, and there's like bits of cornstarch in our oil. When we add all of our liquids in, all of that's going to work together to thicken up our marinade, especially when we then toss our meat in at the very end. Okay, let's get this last guy in here. Let that crisp up. And get these. Beautiful. Now we're going to toss in our noodles here. Now, do not be afraid if your noodles are kind of stuck together. They're going to be stuck together until we pour our marinade, and then they're going to break apart. Now, we did toss them with a little bit of sesame oil, but as we add in our liquid, and that's why I said don't pour it all in before you get there, spoon it over the top. This is going to allow these noodles to break apart, but I do like them to cool down instead of just going straight in there after you boil them, so that they can cool off so they don't get mushy. Do you see how that our marinade is just going to break all of that up? And you're just going to play a little tug of war with it, you know what I mean? And just kind of separate it apart. And I still have more marinade to go in here. This is what's perfect about the marinade, is it's going to allow this to kind of soak into those noodles and give those noodles so much flavor.
You have a question, what type of noodles do you use?
So these are just good old lo mein noodles. They're the wide ones from Kame. I've also used like a ramen noodle as well, where I don't actually cook the ramen base part, but I just take those noodles out, and then I'll use those up as well. You don't have to get super fancy with it. I mean, in a pinch, you could also just use spaghetti or a fettuccine. They're slightly different, kind of textures in a little bit, but they would work in a pinch. You know what I mean? Here we go. You see how now we've got all of these noodles separated apart? And this is why when we boiled these for just a few minutes, 4 minutes, was so that when we added in more of our marinade, it has a chance to soak that up.
Could you use an egg noodle?
You can definitely use an egg noodle in it. I mean, again, it's slightly different, but the beauty of it is this marinade picks up a lot of that flavor, and so it can definitely work well. Okay, let's get these last bit of our crispy beef out here. And this again is our top sirloin that we coated with about a half cup of cornstarch, and as well as our garlic salt. Okay, I'm going to turn this down just a smidge, and we're going to start putting in some of our liquid here. Actually, yeah. I'm gonna pour out just a smidge of this because we don't need all of this oil. I want to use some of it, but I'm just gonna leave. There we go. You want to use some of it because it has these tasty bits in it, but you don't want to have super greasy. I'm gonna add in my liquid. This is again a half cup of water with a half cup of soy sauce. We're gonna mix it in. I'm gonna add in my garlic, about a tablespoon of garlic. Break that up in here, and we also want a tablespoon of ginger paste. If you're gonna use dried ginger, you wanna use just about a teaspoon. You don't want too much of the dried ginger because it's very strong in flavor. So we're gonna add that in here, kind of break it up. Add the rest of this. And now we're gonna add in our brown sugar and our Japanese barbecue sauce. And then it's literally simmering over low heat until that is kind of thickened up, and then we'll toss our meat in it. Let's give our noodles a little bit of a toss, and then I'm gonna turn this down to very, very low to just to let it kind of steam up and cook the rest of the way. Beautiful. You can see we've got our peppers here. We have all that nice flavor on them, and we'll steam it. We're going to put in a half a cup of brown sugar. So this is, I've got a fourth of a cup here, and then we'll use another fourth of a cup. Now this is key to making it that sweet yet savory and like a little bit tangy. Now for the tanginess, we're going to put in a fourth cup of vinegar, which is why you also need the sugar to kind of cut out some of that tanginess. Here we go. Make sure you scrape the bottom of the pan as you go because that's going to really bring up any of those tasty bits. And we need to add in our Japanese barbecue sauce. So about a half cup of Japanese barbecue sauce as well. So I'm just going to kind of squeeze a good amount in here. And Japanese barbecue sauce, don't think like barbecue sauce, like American barbecue sauce. Think about a sweetened soy sauce. That's a little bit thicker, but definitely sweet and salty at the same time. Okay. I'm gonna let that thicken. We want that brown sugar to melt so that it gets a nice little stick onto it. Let's see how much time. Oh, we've got about 30 seconds left, and then our loaf is going to come out, and we're almost done with everything.
Judy sent you a gift.
Well, thank you, Judy. We appreciate that a lot here. Delicious. Has that nice tang from that vinegar in there, but that's sweet and salty as well. Okay, we're going to let that simmer, let all that reduce out as we head over to grab our lovely sourdough bread that's baking up. Let me put my right over here. Now this is mainly going to be used for some sandwiches bread, but I'm sure all of my kids will steal some of it. Oh, look at that peak. I've got like Mount Everest on here. Gorgeous. This is the one that I was like, I don't know how this is going to turn out because this is 3 different flowers in here, but it looks like it turned out pretty darn good. So I'm going to take it out and put it on here. Remove our parchment paper. We've got this beautiful peak again. This is a honey whole wheat loaf of sourdough bread. So it is half whole wheat, half sourdough. We've got this gorgeous, look at the size of this peak there. Our beautiful things. We've got kind of a nice kind of brown cover on here. Remember, this is a wheat loaf, so it's a little bit browner than my normal blonde sourdough, but it is 50% whole wheat on there with honey in it and all-purpose flour, as well as some cake flour.
You have a question about pasta water. Do you always add salt and oil to it?
For my pasta water, I don't ever add oil to it, but I do add salt if I'm going to be using that water in my pasta sauce. If I'm not going to use it in my pasta sauce, I don't add salt to it because I just find that it just adds more sodium than it needs to be in there. Okay, this is our lovely marinade. It's starting to thicken up as it reduces down. When we throw in our meat, it's going to um, kind of stick all over it. And then as it cools slightly after it, it's going to kind of give you that sweet, sticky sauce. But before we get ready to pop that in, let's prep up our green onions. I was looking at these and I'm like, what are they called again? Okay, slide that over there. And I'm gonna take off just the very bottom of my green onions here. And then we're gonna just kind of chop them up. I'm not doing a super, you know what I mean? Like not making them super small because kind of like the green onions on here. I'll do my kind of little slanted cut that makes them just a little bit prettier than a blunt cut. There we go. And then we'll toss those in here. And this fresh onion is going to add just another flavor complexity to that sweet and savory in here. Okay, let's turn this guy down. Let me first actually test the texture of it. So I always like to feel how it feels. You want it to feel a little bit thick when you touches your finger because that's going to let you know that it is going to be sticky when it things. You don't want it to be too runny. Let's add in our meat here and then we'll turn off our thing, but we're going to toss in our meat. Now this is again our top sirloin that we cut nice and thin. We coated with about a half cup of cornstarch and some garlic salt and fried it up. And we're going to put it right back in here. We're going to give all of this a nice coating in here. And now I'm going to turn it off completely because I just wanted it boiling until we coated it. And as this cools, this is going to thicken up even more. Beautiful. And now we're going to finish with our green onions. Excellent. Beautiful. And voila, we've got our Mongolian beef here. And now we've got our delicious lo mein noodles over here. Give them a quick little toss here. But they have this beautiful marinade on them, which just gives them so much flavor. Our sauteed vegetables. We use shiitake mushrooms and shishito peppers. So let's grab up our plate so we can serve up our dinner. Okay. So for dinner tonight, again, we have our stir-fry lo mein pasta or thing with shishito peppers. Let me grab a couple of those. And these are fun because about 1 in 10 has a little bit of a kick to it. And then we have our shiitake mushrooms in there as well as our carrot ribbons and 1 yellow onion. And we made a lovely marinade using a million different things. But we have coconut aminos, our Japanese barbecue sauce, soy sauce, a little bit of oyster sauce and whatnot. And now we have our Mongolian beef. We used top sirloin that we coated with cornstarch and made nice and crispy. And then we made a lovely marinade using brown sugar, soy sauce, Japanese barbecue sauce, ginger, and garlic, and a little bit of vinegar for that lovely tang, but it will have that just tender but crispy at the same time for a really delicious dinner. And then of course, we've got our sourdough whole wheat loaf that we'll be having for sandwiches tomorrow. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us here today. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I try to do live cooking shows every single day, kind of show you what we're making for our family and hopefully teach you guys something along the way. Again, we do upload all of our videos to the link on our page. So if you ever want to recreate any of these recipes at home, you can always go to that link and rewatch what we made. So we've got our lo mein and our Mongolian beef. I do have these two kind of recipe cards for my members. So for my members, you can definitely go there and check out the posts with those recipe cards in it. We also have a link to our Amazon storefront that has all of our different cooking gear and gadgets in it. I've got my Hexclad saute pan in, or my saute pan in, my all-clad saute pan in there, as well as my cutting boards, knives, all the different gadgets I use in the kitchen. But again, thank you so much for joining us here. Don't forget to like and subscribe.